Hey everyone, my name is Lauren Martinez, and for this assignment, I attended two self help meetings. The first one was Cocaine Anonymous meeting, which was a substance abuse support group. And the second one was Narcotics Anonymous meeting, which focused on the individuals that were affected by a loved one's substance use. I'll be discussing in detail each meeting, what I observed, my reactions, and how this experience impacted me both personally and professionally. So, for my first meeting, which was the Cocaine Anonymous, it was surprisingly very welcoming. I had learned that that wasn't the first time these people had met up in the group. I had reached out to one of the presenters that I was going to be attending as like a student observer. And they messaged me back on the same day and they said I was more than welcome to if I wanted to leave my camera on or off. It was up to me, but they were kind of excited to show me how this worked. Um, it was surprisingly not awkward. And I don't know if it was just because the people had met each other for so long, but everybody was really welcoming, even though I was new and they didn't know anything about me. It was just they added me to the group very easily. The presenters did a really good job guiding the meeting, and there was a strong sense of everybody was welcome. There was unity, understanding, and people were openly sharing their addiction, their recovery, if they've relapsed, which a few of them mentioned their relapse. And it felt like a space where individuals could be honest and that you really didn't feel any judgment from it at all. Um, One of the biggest things that I took away from this meeting was how important the community was and how much like a shared experience really did impact everybody. And I think one of the members had mentioned that just being able to see other people and see that they were affected and hear their stories and know that it's not just them, help them kind of get out of a dark place. They all seemed to understand what stage they were at, whether it was the beginning, middle, or end, where they were going with this. It was very much like a lived experience that everybody was willing to understand with each other. This connected to what we're learning in class, especially how recovery is often strengthened through connection and support systems. And I was kind of taken aback by the online meeting aspect of it because in person, it's more like, in my mind, it was more tangible. But online, it seemed to be that way as well for people. So that was really interesting seeing that. And for my second meeting, I went to Narcotics Anonymous, which was the family support group. That was also online. Um, that one felt completely different. It was much heavier. It was painful at times. Like you could really feel like the emotion coming off of some of the people speaking. And they were, some of the individuals were just, they were exhausted and they were deeply hurt by what they were going through. And it, instead of focusing on recovery from substance use, the focus was more on like the emotional impact, kind of explaining stress and loss and frustration. And it connected more on that level of like kind of explaining what they were feeling at the time, for at least that meeting, of what they were feeling and what it, you know, what that looks like in everybody else. Cause everybody was like, oh, I am grieving, but I'm not showing it in tears. It's more of like, it's coming off, it's like anger. So it, I mean, it really stood out for me how much pain addiction caused for the individual. And it also brought back more of like a, it felt more personal for me with the family group than it did with the individual group for Cocaine Anonymous. Um, so some of the assumptions I had before attending these meetings was I thought with it being online, you can't really force somebody to share because they can just turn off their camera, or they don't have to turn on their camera, or they really don't have to share if they don't want to. But it seemed to be that it was more open than what I thought, because some people were more willing to share with their camera off. And I was pretty shocked by that. I also thought the focus was going to be mainly on, like, oh, hey, this is the 12 steps. This is how we're going to do it. And it wasn't. So after attending, it's what I had mentioned previously, that it didn't feel as forced. I was shocked by how supportive an online program could be in this situation. And people, now I couldn't tell if they were telling the truth or not, but it seemed like they were much more open and willing to share. If somebody was a little bit hesitant, you had other members that were like, oh, I went through that. I know what that feels like. And it kind of like encouraged other people to talk. And it felt very safe for an online portion. And so for the comparison part of the two meetings, I had mentioned it earlier that there was a huge difference. One was more, like, I think one had more of a bigger emotional tone. So the family meeting, the Narcotics Anonymous, had a bigger emotional tone. It was heavier. It focused more on what they were feeling and how they were feeling it and how they were expressing that, versus the Cocaine Anonymous was welcoming. It was unifying. It was just kind of sharing this sense of understanding with each other. And they both emphasized support and connection, but the focuses was very different. And for the 12 steps and how they showed up, the 12-step model, it includes principles of admission, seeking support, making amends, on ongoing reflection. And for Cocaine Anonymous, it was very like naturally flowing with that. People, I didn't really hear so much about the powerlessness, but I did hear of, they reflected on what they did and why they did it. They went to these groups, they enjoyed coming to these groups, and that was like they're seeking support. And then their way of making amends was like they were holding themselves accountable. And the Narcotics Anonymous meeting, it was similar principles but applied differently, especially around letting go of control, focusing on like personal healing and setting boundaries. So that was very interesting to see how they were. It wasn't just this rigid structure that they wanted everybody to follow. It was kind of bouncing around, but still in tune with what people were going with that session. For my personal reactions, it felt very different. For the cocaine meeting, it was comfortable. It was a very strong sense of community. But during the Narcotics Anonymous meeting, I felt more emotional, and it was harder to listen to at times because some of the members on there, just you could tell that they were younger, and it just kind of reminded me of how that felt when I was younger. So it just hit a little different. I think this experience changes how I view addiction, but I think it really changed how I view the 12-step program, because I viewed it as a very rigid, like, it always just seemed very rigid. It always seemed like this is, you have to go this, this, and this. But it showed up very differently with these meetings, especially online. I'd be more curious to see what the in-person meetings are like and how that feels with people that not necessarily hide behind the camera, but how they present themselves when they have a room full of people that they can't just turn off their camera. It's the way addiction affects the individual is very much layered, and it's kind of like you have to peel back each layer to try and help the clients that we're going to be working with. So as a future counselor, I think this helped me understand the importance of working on both sides. So not just the individual, but the family as well. The emotional burnout that loved ones can feel and how that presents itself very differently depending on maybe the duration of how long they've been dealing with their loved one having an addiction problem or how old they are. Because I would say that a child is, like, for example, I think a child is more willing to work with their parent or guardian who has an addiction problem longer than a parent would be willing to do that from just personal experience. I think it also explained a difference of providing support just beyond that. I'm here as your counselor and I understand you. And it's like, hey, no, like these support groups are here and they're very helpful. I think with the connection to the course, it connects strongly to what we're learning in class because it is an addiction class, but it reinforced the biopsychosocial model showing how addiction impacts not just the individual, but the relationships and the social systems around everybody. It also connects to the stages of change, as I noticed individuals in different stages. Some actively working towards recovery, others still struggling with ambivalence. So it's, I think that would make counseling group counseling has always been very interesting to me, but I feel like it's more layered seeing it in the addiction process. So that was very interesting to see for at least a group process for addiction. Um, Overall, I think attending these meetings was very impactful. It increased my empathy. I think there's always going to be a part of me that's empathetic towards it. It definitely did challenge my assumptions when it came to the individual classes, and it does give me a better understanding of how addiction affects both the individual and the families. But I think it's it's opened the door to see how much I can learn from this outside of the class and realizing that my parents' addiction is something that still affects me. So it's maybe the anonymous family classes would be more interesting to attend without having an assignment attached to it. But it's definitely going to influence how I approach my clients in future counseling work.